Okay, hi everybody. In this video, we're going to show you how you can use Orchestra and Microsoft Fabric Lakehouse tables to schedule pipelines and run tasks on any custom date. So I guess first question is, why might you want to do this? Well, let's say you need to run, let's say normally you want to run stuff Monday to Friday. In that case, Cron is going to be fine. But then maybe you also don't want to run things on the weekends. Maybe you also don't want to run things on holidays. Maybe those holidays are different in different countries. This is a hard thing to get right. So typically what we see people doing is keeping a table of holidays that needs to be referenced in the orchestrator. In this case, I actually have that table here in Fabric, and I'm using Spark SQL to go ahead and see where we don't have a holiday and it's not the current date. But these are basically all the holidays. So if you wanted to make this work, let's say you only wanted to run something when it wasn't a holiday, you could run a query like this, which is saying, get me the holidays in the United Kingdom for today. And if it doesn't return anything, you know you don't need to run stuff. So how can we use this in a pipeline trigger in Orchestra? Let's go ahead and take a look. So in this case, I want to go ahead and run this pipeline. Let's say I want to run it every day, Monday to Friday. But I don't want it to run on a holiday. In that case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement a sensor. And a sensor is a bit like having a cron schedule with an extra check. This is the cron schedule. We're now going to run the sensor check. So let's call it tsql check holiday. And we can go ahead and write a Fabric SQL query. Now you could do this, which is to copy this SQL we've got here. It's an annoying thing from Microsoft, but this syntax won't work because it's not valid T-SQL. So I can go ahead and do this, but it's not going to work. In fact, what you need is something like this, which is much more familiar to those of you that have used SQL Server before. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this. And then what you'd probably also want to do is add in the where clause. Now in this case, we've sort of defined it so that it never works because we're saying select the top 0 rows. So not actually getting any rows. But if you wanted to see how this does work, we can take out the current date filter and we can just fetch 1 row. So this is always going to work now, just for illustrative purposes. I'm going to go ahead and make this start in a couple of minutes, and then I can show you what's happening. Okay, we're back. And if you recall, we started that sensor at 25 past 10, and now it's running. So we can see some stuff's going on. If I go back to the pipeline, we can also see that this check can be used to gate specific tasks, which is pretty cool. So again, I'm basically doing the same check here. So I'm saying, right, if this is going to be a holiday, then I'm going to get a row back. So that means that the test is going to pass if there is a row. It's going to fail if there are more than 1 million rows, which is obviously impossible. So it's never going to error. And it's going to end in a warning state if there are no rows. So what does that mean? It means if it's not a holiday, then this thing is going to warn. What I then have is I have these 2 tasks, which I only want to run if it's a holiday. And remember, this task is only going to succeed if it's a holiday. So what I can do is I can change the trigger conditions here to say that the holiday has to, basically the previous task has to succeed for this to run. Now, you can also make this more sort of fancy. there's an interesting feature here, which is called optional parameters. And what this is going to allow you to do is set outputs for this task. Those outputs will then be available to evaluate in the condition. And, it's basically like you take the previous task, and then you can take things like the task run outputs, and then you can put in the output name here. So if you've got more complicated things to do, you can make this even more complicated, which is really cool. And then at the end, we've got this quite interesting pattern where we know we want this to run sort of on every day anyway. So what does that mean? That means if this ends in a warning state, this needs to run. If this does end in a warning state, then these two tasks are going to get skipped. So we kind of want to run this if the sort of run the next pipeline task here is in a succeeded or a skipped state, and holiday is in a successful or warning state. Again, if you had multiple output variables and you wanted to evaluate them in a more complicated way, Orchestra does support that. So if we go ahead and take a look at the lineage, we can see what's happened. So, this query hasn't returned anything, which we knew, right? It's select top 0, indicating that it's not a holiday today. As a result, the holiday tasks have been skipped, which means that this is in a skip state, this is in a warning state. Now, because this is going to run if this is either in a skipped or a successful state, and this is in a warning or a successful state, that condition's satisfied, and then we've run this too. So yeah, this is how our conditionality is working in Fabric. It's pretty cool. Just remember, this syntax isn't going to work. It has to be T-SQL, which is really annoying, but that's Microsoft for you. And bonus points, because it's T-SQL, if you have a SQL Server in Fabric, that will work too. So you can actually use all of our sort of Fabric-related integrations with a Lakehouse or a SQL Server. So, if you had, say, a SQL Server that was just DBO public holidays, that would work. And you can specify the database here in that case. So yeah, I think this is super cool, super flexible with the functionality. Obviously, don't use it unless you have to because it's quite complicated. And yeah, let us know what you think in the comments.